in the 90s or the 80s, you have this image of Asia being very backward. I couldn't imagine what the Asia was. So I landed in Singapore and I see this very modern city. Like I couldn't imagine it was Asia. It was like Paris, but in Asia. When I came to Cambodia, I see a country that was trying to recover from years of war and civil war and genocide. But then at the same time, I really felt at home. I didn't feel at home in France, but when I came to Cambodia, I feel at home.
Hello, Clever Habits Tribe, and welcome back to Season 7. Today, we are going to get really funky. We have the Cambodian reanimator of the film and music industry over there in Cambodia after all of the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnamese occupation. They're restarting their culture. So I welcome today SOK Visal. Mr. Visal, thank you so much for being with us today. I don't know if you all can see it, but he's wearing a Wu-Tang Clan shirt. He's been in hip-hop for a while.
Nice meeting you, Gaby. And hello, everybody.
Of course, I'm not old enough to have been there at the beginning, but when I heard hip-hop and Cambodia in the same sentence, I said, what? So you grew up in France, but your family is from Cambodia. You were born there. So tell us a little bit about being a bicultural person growing up in France in the 90s. How was that? 70s, 80s, 90s?
So I was born in 71, and we had the chance to leave Cambodia before the Khmer Rouge took over the country because my father was a soldier. He was in the army, so he was fighting against them. Somehow he felt that the future didn't look good, so he decided to take his whole family and we crossed the border and stay in Thailand for a few months, I think, until we learned that the Khmer Rouge took over the country and there was no way that's going to be good. So after that, we were proposed to go to France as refugees. So we took that, and I came back to Cambodia in 1993. So I've been here 30 years now, 30 years plus, I would say. So yeah, I'm bicultural. I would say tricultural because I've also had the chance to live in the US for 2 years. I was sent there in the end of the 80s, early 90s to live in the States with my Cambodian family who were also refugees. They survived the Khmer Rouge and moved to America in the 80s. When I was growing up in France, I wasn't into the Cambodian culture. So I was hanging out with a lot of North African people, Africans and Arabic and stuff like that. A few Asians, but I wasn't connected to my Cambodian culture. So I started to really get connected when I was in the US, speaking Khmer all the time and listening to Cambodian music all the time and stuff like that.
Crazy that you guys got out just in time because for those of you who are listening or not familiar with the history, just in 4 years of Pol Pot being in charge of the country, 1 to 3 million, 25% of the population was killed.
Yeah, we were lucky, I think. We were very, very lucky at the same time. Yeah, I would say that my experience in France wasn't the greatest, but we were lucky, yeah. For sure, we avoided the genocide, we avoided the camps and the starvation and the famine and the disease and also the killings and stuff like that. That's for sure, yeah. Because about the moving, I wasn't really good at school, so I didn't really have a lot of friends, so I became very introverted. It wasn't all bad. I would say that, yeah, it wasn't the childhood that I was the childhood that everyone expect to have in France. It did turn me to the person that I am today, basically. 82, 83, and you're starting seeing all these things on TV, hip hop and breakdance and DJing, and there was this new sound, this new culture. So I got into rapping in the end of the 80s, 87, 88, 89. We were pretty well known in our neighborhood. So we live in a housing project in the north side of Paris called the Nessubois, Les 3000. That was the culture that finally I felt that I had a purpose because I could use my drawing skills and I could use my writing skills and I could use my rapping skills and I didn't have to go to school to learn the stuff. Everything came out just like that naturally. So being able to start something with that nothing helped me a lot after that in the second part of my life when I came to Cambodia. And this is thanks to hip hop.
Yeah, that's a great segue to what I was going to ask next. You decided to go back to Cambodia. Most people who are first-gen immigrants, they're like, I'll go back and visit. But you moved back. after Cambodia went back to being a
Yeah.
constitutional monarchy. So why did you decide to do that?
Because of graffiti and tag and stuff like that. So I got arrested a few times. My mom being afraid that I might turn bad because my little brother was already in the gang. She was so scared that she said, "Hey, take this air ticket and go visit your family in the U.S." And so she sent me to America I spent 2 years in America where I did a year in high school and I did a year in community college, majoring in liberal arts. My parents couldn't pay for the second year of university, so I dropped out. Went back to France for a year. I was doing small jobs. I did some security jobs, some part-time labor jobs, just to get by, just to to be able to survive. And my parents was already back in Cambodia. I think my parents never wanted to stay in France. They always wanted to come back to Cambodia. So as soon that they heard that there was elections, there was some peace accord signed and stuff, they were already planning to go back to Cambodia. After a year of doing this small job, I got sick and tired. This wasn't the life that was looking for myself. I'm an artist. I wanted to do something that I like. My parents said, "Hey, why don't you come to Cambodia? It's a new country." At first, I didn't want to go, but at the same time, I think the trip to America gave me this sense and taste for travel and exploration. So I said, yeah, why not? I decided, okay, maybe this is the opportunity, maybe this is the time for me also to move and go to Cambodia and see what's up. In the 90s or the 80s, we have this image of Asia being very backward. I land in Singapore and I see this very modern city. Like I couldn't imagine it was Asia. It was like Paris, but in Asia. And I was like shocked. They have high rises and people were using mobile phone back then. The roads were clean, the car was clean, there was no dust. This like changed my perception of the world. When I came to Cambodia, I see a country that was trying to recover from years of war and civil war and genocide. But then at the same time, I really felt at home. I didn't feel at home in France, but when I came to Cambodia, I feel at home. When I arrived in 1993, I decided to kind of go through a few years of immersive experience, meaning that I really wanted to become Cambodian. I really wanted to hang out with Cambodian, the locals. I really wanted to learn the language, learn the culture, the customs, everything else. So I did that for about 7 years. Somehow I get into promoting hip hop with a friend of mine. He was also a returnees, what we call ourselves a returnees. We came back from another country. So my friend DJ Soap was returning from the US. He was from Long Beach. And he came, same thing, he came to Cambodia to follow his parents, his father. I started producing Cambodian hip hop, but using old music from the 60s and 70s. That's something that my friend didn't do. A lot of the artists that worked with him were rapping on industry beats, beats from Dr. Dre, from Snoop Dogg, from 50 Cent, whatever. I took the vocals from his crew and I mixed them with my own beats, my Cambodian hip hop beats. A few years later, I founded Cambodia's first hip hop label called Klap Ya Handz. It's almost 20 years now. It started in 2005. From that point on, where I took over and started promoting hip hop and Cambodian hip hop through a collective of young rappers, underground rappers, that some of them became very famous in the early 2000s. That was before the film thing. But in fact, the thing is, my dream was always to make films, not music. I love music. I mean, I love music and I love film. And I think when I was growing up in France in the 80s, I was very much exposed to American culture. So before hip hop, I was watching a lot of American movies and I was listening to a lot of American music as well. For me, the 80s, end of the 70s and the 80s were the most creative eras of Hollywood. They don't do it anymore, films like that. That was my dream since I was a kid. But the music wasn't part of my dream. The music came in and I started making music because I'm an artist and I love that. I love creating and I love producing. After a few years working for companies, for agencies, advertising agencies, and in 2009, I got sick and tired. And I think Klap Ya Handz was already there. So I was busy. I was working nonstop. I had a full-time job, but then at night and in the weekends, I was working for the label. Through the label, producing music and working with artists, at one point I had to put images, visual to the music that I was producing. I borrowed money from my friends. I went to Singapore, buy some camera equipment, and I started making music video for the label, for my music label, for my artists. And that's how slowly I got into TV commercials and series, and then opening my film company in 2009, 802 Films. There was no film industry, there was no music industry in Cambodia back then. My real dream was to make movies, and finally, it's in 2010 that I was involved in my first feature film as a first assistant director. And with the director of that first project, we got to make my first feature film in 2013. And since then, I've got involved in producing, co-producing, directing, co-directing about 4 feature films. I had the drive, I had the hunger, I had the passion. So it was easy for me to learn. And I wasn't scared of failure. I wasn't scared of making mistakes because and still until now that's the way I've been operating. Just do it and see and figure it out. Then through the process, there was nothing, and there was no school, there's no film school, there was no music school, there was nothing. So everything has to be created. I felt like it needed to be done because there was a gap to fill back then, and still now. I think we needed a location manager, but there's no location manager. Back in the early when I started my film, there was no location manager. So you had to create a position. So you take a guy that had a little bit of wit and a bit, common sense, and say, "Yo, man, we're gonna shoot this music video or this TV commercial, and we need a house or whatever." And you did, yeah, just go now and try to find a place. You work with what you have, and this again, it goes back to the philosophy and the culture of hip hop. It was always about doing the best with what you have, or start something with nothing. This is what helped me.
I'm sure a lot of people are thinking now that they've seen all this, like, I didn't even know this was here. We're seeing a boom in like Afro beats, Nollywood, K-pop, K-drama. Is Cambodian hip hop the next thing?
I hope so. I hope so. I think there's something special about Cambodian culture. That's for sure. If you look at the history, if you look at the Khmer people, we call it the Khmer, that's our ethnicity. We probably were the greatest civilization in Southeast Asia. And somehow we went from this to this, we shrunk. I think in the 60s, Phnom Penh was called the pearl of Southeast Asia. And why? Our culture was blooming. There was all these creative things happening, cinema and Cambodian rock and roll and architecture. Even, I don't know if you heard, the Prime Minister of Singapore came in Cambodia in the 69 or something. And he was like, "Yo, I want my country, I want Singapore to be this country." For me, there was 2 golden age. There was the golden age back in the Angkor era, the Angkor temples under the management of King Jayavarman VII. But also there was the 60s and 70s before the whole Khmer Rouge thing. Phnom Penh was a blooming creative city, and it was modern, it was peaceful, and the arts and the creativity was really, vibrant back then. I do believe that there will be another golden age of Cambodia culture and art. I don't think that Khmer hip hop, Cambodian hip hop will be the next thing. It could be, but I think there's maybe ways for us to create something that could become international or global in the future. That's possible. Klap Ya Handz, we actually the first label to have been, I would say, to have this kind of a international influence. Our music was pretty much listened, adopted by the Khmer diaspora living in America, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, all around the world. And we're also the first label to actually manage and develop international artists. So we signed our first international artist 5 years ago. He's Nigerian from England. Nowadays, there's no border. Everybody is able to be known anywhere around the world. I think music is universal. It's getting more and more universal actually now because people are more open to listen to anything now. Yeah, I think there's a big, huge fan base of K-pop in Europe and in America now. They don't look Asian. I think we're living a very interesting time.
Visal, the last thing I want to ask you, you mentioned it a few times in your other answers, but there's a lot more young creators that are using the internet than before. But I think, as you mentioned also, part of Gen Z's problem is because we're children of the internet, we expect things to happen really fast. So how can you help someone who's maybe a creator, maybe they're in their 4th year, 5th year, or even earlier than that, to not give up?
I have kids. I have 3 kids. I have a 9 years old, the youngest one, and then I got a daughter who's 22 and a son who's 28. My daughter is 22, almost 23 now. She lives in Bali. Of course, because of the gene, I guess. She wants to be a DJ, and so she's trying to build a DJ career in Bali. And at the same time, she has a full-time job for rents and bill. And my son, my 28, he's also a creative. He's a music producer, DJ, visual artist, and he does all kind of stuff, videos and stuff, photography and stuff like that. So they're from that generation. I wouldn't say that they're impatient. They're not built like us for sure. They're not built like the people from my generation, and I didn't understand that when they were growing up. And now I finally decide to say, hey, this is this generation. You can't do much about it. You gotta you gotta let them live and learn from their environment, their world, the world they're living in. And the world they're living is not the same world that I lived in 30 years, to 40, 50 years ago. This world that they're living in is moving so fast, evolving so fast. Technology is changing so much, trends are changing so much and so fast. It's really hard. It's really hard to keep up.
Okay. Yeah, I think sometime soon somebody's going to have to write a book or make a movie about you. There's a lot of stuff to learn from your experience. So thank you again so much for your time today. And Klap Ya Hybrids, thank you so much for staying with us until the end. I know this must have blown your mind like it did mine. But what I want you to remember from Visal is that even though things are changing, you might have to change your definition of success. But the main part that is remaining the same is finding what you really love to do and sticking with it. This is GabyV for Klap Ya Hybrids, and we'll see you in the next one.